Hi, my name is Ramirez. These are my afterthoughts after making that St. Paul's video. Um, yeah, I was not expecting to make that video, but yesterday I just saw that Trinity video, got curious, kept digging around, but finding that Vanity Fair article was the most telling of everything that I've seen because, like, it straight up goes to show you, like, these people do not give a at all, right? They're willing to waste money in order to just allow the center or the school. Ew. You just move that out of the way. I don't know, because the way I saw it is like, right? You build up this school, you build it as to be as reputatious as it is, but then as soon as the 70s roll around, a different, like, you just change the agenda on people, just completely change the agenda on people. And then by the 80s, what? You make it a co-ed school, and then you just... No, I think it was like 72 when they made it a co-ed school. And the reason why the year 1972 is important is because something had occurred on Wall Street, and the All-American team... Basically, the All-American team is... It started in 1972 when two editors came together, and they wanted to find the best, right? They approached it with the idea of an analytics firm, in the sense of, let's keep track of all the most important people there is, right? Pretty simple. Which is why I thought it was very interesting. But for St. Paul, that school has been around since like 18 something, right? Like 1886 or 1880. Can't even remember the year. But I just found it incredible that this school just had all this history, right? But when I found those articles about abuse cases, it reminded me of something that I was still kind of holding on to. And that's a sort of resentment that I have for not being there for somebody at a time when they were really asking me for help. That was Zubs. Not to say I could have done anything, right? Like, I shouldn't really beat myself up over it, but it just lingered on my mind because I was somebody that she would often talk to. And she would tell me of the really weird stuff that was going on at her school. And it wasn't just her school. Even outside of school, she was targeted. Like, she was always constantly being invited to very specific events. That if, right, like, and one of those events that she was invited to was at Comet Ping Pong. And for those who don't know about Comet Ping Pong, it's just another pizza parlor place. Regardless of that, the whole idea that really kind of motivated me to make the video was the idea of private schooling, right? I've been to private schools most of my life. The only time I ever went to a public school was during my elementary years. 1st to 5th grade was the only time I was ever exposed to public school. After that, it was just Catholic school. So I understand from a very deep perception how public education is shaped. But to view this public school be the way it is, right? And find out of certain abuse cases at certain time periods just leads me to believe that this was it's not that it was a coordinated effort. What I'm more likely to suspect is right, the school's a boarding school, right? So that means no parents, nobody. Under those conditions, being a teacher at that school would only really entice a certain kind of individual. It would only really invite a certain kind of presence to that environment. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that when you have certain individuals who are known for a certain kind of behavior, and when they want to be discreet as possible, wouldn't it be a good idea to go to a boarding school that is out in the middle of nowhere, and it's very difficult to reach that place, right? Right, because they didn't build the highway infrastructure, the road infrastructure. None of that really started occurring until like the late 70s. So, so either way, and it's the fact that it also has like a backyard of a forest also just allows for a lot more egregious shit to happen. So when it comes down to it, from the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, it is very difficult to assume that what do I say? Because I'm going based off of what I know from the Vanity Fair article, right? Because none of these were ever public allegations. None of these ever went forward to any meaningful degree. But at the same time, if this school was that prestigious and it had to keep track, or at least have the wherewithal to know whose student, what student is what student, in the sense of who is their father, what does their father do for a living, who's their mom, is their mom of a particular status, would there be any repercussions if anything if anything happens to this kid, right? These are questions that need to be quantified to some degree, and the only schools that really need to associate themselves with this are, in this case, New Yorkers, because when you think of old money, New York is a very perfect example of this. When you think of new money, and it's when you think of Chicago and Los Angeles, because both of those places were created in retaliation of New York and its monopolies that it had. So I thought it was very interesting to see that even within the internal state of the school, the students knew who was who. They knew who to identify. Because in that article, it describes how there's a certain kid who didn't know he had extended family members, but he ended up going to the school and he's just like, whoa, I have extended family? I didn't know this. And that whole story, but all of these people were famous CEOs, hedge fund managers, like people of importance, affluence, right? It is New York City, right? So I shouldn't really be that harking on the situation, but at the same time, you don't think that the school staff would quantify this to any degree, especially if there were any predators in their midst? I'm just saying. And there's a motif of who these predators will go after, which is why when I found that John Kerry article talking about he's a teen outcast, it really rubbed me the wrong way, because it's just like, okay, this is my belief, right? That there are psychopaths in certain positions of power. And what usually tends to happen with these psychopaths, or these people that tend to push these boundaries, they're very narcissistic. It's the whole thing of why a criminal will go back to the scene of the crime. So these people love seeing their name in a variety of different places. And they like flexing the fact that they have more power over others, even though, right, in John Kerry's position, John Kerry is supposed to be a more powerful individual because he holds a higher public office. But the people at his reunion were belittling him, calling him a teen outcast, a teacher's pet. So how does that make sense? Unless that John Kerry is still playing out his trauma from school days and would not retaliate because he still harbors those emotions towards his fellow classmates. But that's just a guess. It is very daunting, and it is a very weird thing to, how do I say, quantify, because nobody wants to. Nobody would. It's not easy. It's not easy to accept the fact that these schools are being targeted by predators. It isn't easy to assume that within these schools that such people could exist secretly for so long. But meanwhile, you had the Vanity Fair article talk about it's one of its anniversaries, where it's that staff member was still there years and years later, and he was being revered as, like, look at what a great teacher he is. So it is kind of very strange to read a Vanity Fair article that has so much truth in it. I don't know. And the reason why John Kerry being a teen outcast matters is because that's one of the motifs that predators go after. They go after kids who have no friends. kids who are on the outskirts, and kids they believe that will bring other kids to them. So it is weird. But beyond that, we also have to acknowledge the fact that how do I say this? The hazing rituals. In universities and colleges, you have Greek Week, but to have these sort of hazing rituals at boarding schools is a very dangerous thing, because you essentially give kids King of the Flies powers, right? Because now there's one leader and everybody has to listen to him. So, and it was right, and just to also read how it wasn't just at St. Paul's that this was happening at. This was also happening at the Milton School. And when you think about it, men to each other can be really fucked up. But the worst of them all? The worst perpetrators, honestly? Ooh, who could be the worst and the meanest to each other? Who do you think, it's men or women? Because the fact that like we had instances where some of these girls were forcing other girls to perform acts for men, right? Like what kind of hazing and what kind of, I don't know. I look at those sort of things and I'm just like, you're really pushing boundaries here, right? And not on the boundary levels of like LGBTQA plus whatever the fuck. I don't know. I just don't like it. I just don't like the fact that, like, the way I see it, right, from a very analytical point of view, these are very time-specific instances for a very time-specific age group. So when I think about it clearly, it would let me know that if there were major influences in culture, they would be reflected in the school, which is why him saying that in the Vanity Fair article was like, oh, dude, you're dropping truth bombs here, because in reality, if we can somehow mimic aspects of this behavior that happened here at this school, and we can mimic them across the board, across the nation, what kind of individuals can we breed? What kind of behavior can we induce inside of people that, right, essentially very soft forms of manipulation? Very fucked up. And I just discovered all this accidentally because I just got curious of like, oh, is this Trinity School? Is this Trinity School a Catholic school? Is this What made it even weirder was the fact that like these are Ivy Preparatory League schools, so they're just meant to prepare you to go into Harvard, to Ivy League, right? And the reason why I find that like hella strange is how he describes in the article how only legacies, right, during the time period of the mid 80s, only legacies were going to Harvard. Nobody else was going to Harvard. I thought that was very interesting because I'm like, why? Because you know what I mean? Like, this is supposed to be a prestigious school, but the parents who went to the school, who went during a different era, go to the school and they're like, what's going on here? All of these kids have lost themselves, right? Like, none of them are doing anything right or correct, or like they're all just, I don't know, reminds me of the Forrest Gump movie. How goes over to visit his friend, catches her, Jenny, catches her in the car and shit. That's the scene that I thought of when the parents walk into the lobby and they just see like two kids just going at it on the couch, and it's just like, what the fuck, dude? Like, who let this happen? Is there nobody monitoring the dorms? Is there nobody monitoring the school at all? Like, and right around the time that somebody who gets to be the rector is the same guy who also became a congressman, who happened to be the guy that allowed girls into the school, who changed the dress code, and who ultimately wanted to improve the characteristics of children. Like, how does this not sound like a psyop? How does this not sound like an MK Ultra study that was purposefully designed to see how high school kids would be affected on it? I don't know. To me, this is a whole strange series of events because I did not want to read that. And, talking about this school makes me an enemy. Talking about this school and mentioning all of the weird atrocities that are going on. And I'm talking about from like the 50s all the way to present day. Think about that. Think about how many parents I'm making my enemy. Think about how many graduates, alumni who went to that school are now going to look at me and be like, How dare you talk about my prestigious? I had a great experience at that. I'll have you know that, bro. If you think Karens are bad, hell no. You haven't seen a Karen. You haven't seen a real bad Karen until you find a Karen that can actually fuck with your life. Talk to a politician and be like, yo, this fool's talking too much truth about the schools that we went to, and how dare he belittle us. And you know what I mean? Like the whole, and what's even funnier to me was the fact that like these schools actively taught kids what a WASP was. That's insane to me. Dude, I like normally white people don't quantify that aspect of themselves. But the fact that I'm looking at a prestigious school, look at kids who are not a part of the Blue Bloods, literally get taught that you're a WASP, you're nothing, you're trash. I'm like, I'm not saying WASP are trash, but to be fair, you kind of are, right? Because WASP it was a psyop. The way I see it, if you fall for psyops, if you fall for ideological rhetoric, if you fall for identitarian practices, if you fall for any of this dumb bullshit, you're an idiot to me. So I give no apologies to that shit. So like I said, if you believe in a WASP, you're a fucking idiot. And all of these, I could just imagine like the 40 and 50 and the plus year olds of like who would get pissed at me talking this way. Right? Because what was it? You're 40 now. You're 40 in today's age if you were like born in 88 or 89. Right? I don't even remember that well. Either way. Great times to see that we're living in. Who would have fucking known, right? That means anybody who graduated during the 70s would be around 60? Wouldn't that be the demographic of people that would have comorbidities, right? That would, if they took an experimental shot, they would probably bend over and croak. So who knows what's coming to light, right? This is in New York. And keep in mind, Donald Trump went to a boarding school. I don't know what boarding school he went to. I didn't even go that far. I didn't even care that much. But I remember that fool went to a military cadet boarding school. And he's 70 now. So that means he was probably privy to a lot of what was going on during the 70s and 80s in New York. And he probably knew very well what was occurring behind closed doors in some of these boarding schools. Because it was all over the news. Right? Like, actually, aspects of it were in the news. In reality, this was like a very hush-hush, quiet thing. I don't even want... you could quantify how much they paid in damages, how much they paid in hush money. I don't know, like... And the fact that these are private schools and that the Vanity Fair article talked about the committee, trustees, people who have ultimate decision of what gets to happen to these schools, and how that description will live in my head where he's all like, from David Hicks, where he talks about how the people who are the trustees and the people who manage the school reflect their insecurities onto the school's mission. They reflect their financial and their personal insecurities over the school, right? So these elite already don't believe that their children are going to be the top of the creme, that they have to ruin the school to make sure that their kids have a fighting shot. Like, what? Like, huh? And now, like, I'm still quantifying a lot of thoughts that are going on in my head. Because I don't know. Because I feel like I have to write this rhetoric in my head, not to Asians, not to Latinos, and not to blacks, but specifically for white people. And I have to tell them, don't ever think you're fucking superior. Like, deadass. After reading this shit from, like, these prestigious Ivy League preparatory schools, after reading all of the abuses that come from your side of the aisle, how sophisticated and how desperate your side of the aisle gets into hiding all of these crimes, into then making sure that it doesn't make the news, into making sure that it doesn't hit the headlines, it doesn't go into the court. What makes you think I'm going to be that kind? Realistically. After the fault has really literally landed only on one side of the aisle. And to be fair, I get it. It's not all whites. I always exclude in my head the citizens. But if you are not a citizen, if you are somebody who has the wherewithal to understand these systems, these upper echelon systems, and you still play along these stupid lines of identitarianism or race realism or race, you're a fucking idiot. Because these people fucking hate you. They hate you so much that they call you WASP even to this day. Like, but I'm special. White achievement is all achievement. It's just like, wow, dude. Do you not hear what I just said? Do you not hear that I just pointed out that, like, you are the detriment to your own self? Your own people prey on you the worst. That's tiny hats. It's just like, again, who is on the board of trustees? Who gets to decide who gets hired? Last time I checked, they weren't fucking tiny hats. Remember, right? They had to add diversity picks in order to stave off all this other shit. So to assume that all of these weird blue bloods are all tiny hats is fucking hilarious to me, dude. Especially after reading some of these names. I didn't actually state what names that I did Google later to kind of be like, who's this? Who's that? You have no idea. None. Absolutely none. Like, this gets so much bigger that I really wish I didn't look into it. That's why I just got scared, where I was just like, fuck, dude, if I talk about this, I'm shining a light on a scenario that could blow the whole lid off in all of New York City. It would make James O'Keefe look like nothing in comparison to what the fuck I found. But you know, I can't take it to court, right? Because I don't have any of that legal argument shit yet. But the whole point is, what I discovered in the educational system of New York City is worse than Pizzagate. It's worse than Comet Ping Pong. It's worse. It goes to show that this culture of predators has been in this country for far longer than anyone would like to believe. And it was systematic. It was completely done at the behest of mayors, governors, House of Representatives. Like, it was completely done to such a systematic level. And it was aided and abetted the whole way through. I'm left in shock because I don't even know how to process all this shit. and that's the system that we live in. I guess I'll just leave it here. Just because I really don't know what to say after this. Besides the fact that, like, I put my fucking self in grave danger by talking about Pualies. Now, here's the thing. All of these prestigious kids, they have a die-hard allegiance to these schools. They have a die-hard allegiance as to some of these teachers, right? Just like the article we read, and the person who wrote that article was like, I revered these men as good men. They never did anything to me. It's because they picked their victims very carefully. But who knows what kind of predators still exist in their education system today. But I'll leave that here. My name is Ramirez, and hopefully I'll make another episode where I deep dive into something completely different that has nothing to do with this sort of abuse. Because it's even too much for my heart.